Major Indoor Lacrosse, a dynamic young sports league entering its fourth season in 1990, quickly becoming the country's fifth major sport, making an impact, making contact with the future. Indoor lacrosse combines the speed of hockey, the skill and finesse of basketball, and the hard-hitting contact of professional football. Indoor lacrosse, the toughest game on the turf. Major Indoor Lacrosse began play in 1987 as the Eagle Pro Box Lacrosse League. Owners Chris Fritz and Russ Cline took the world's best lacrosse players, 4 established Northeastern arenas, and founded a 4-team league that competed in the 15-game inaugural season. The league averaged 7,500 in attendance in 1987, with the season high coming on January 31st as a near-sellout crowd packed the Philadelphia Spectrum to watch the Wings. In 1988, each team played 4 home and 4 away games as the MILL continued to make an impact on the American sports scene. Average attendance climbed to 8,300 per game. 1988 was the first year of the MILL syndication network. 8 regular season games and the championship game were broadcast to 7 million homes in 16 major markets around the U.S. and Canada. 1989 marked a milestone in MILL history as the league expanded from 4 to 6 teams. The Detroit Turbos roared into the Motor City with the second highest attendance in the league. The New England Blazers became the first professional sports franchise at the Centrum in Worcester. The competition and excitement of the 1989 season can be captured in the last few seconds of its sold-out championship game at the Spectrum between the Wings and New York Saints last April.
One last rush for New York. There it is. Driscoll, he's in. He shoots. It's saved. It's over. The Wings have won the Major Indoor Lacrosse League championship.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
I thank you, Corey Coates, once again for your dulcet tones and for setting us up nicely for another fun-filled episode of what we call Good Seats Still Available. Yes, that's the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. Thanks so much for joining us, and we hopefully will delight you to no end one more time this week with our first ever exploration into the sport of lacrosse. A number of you have been asking me about the sport of lacrosse, both the outdoor and especially the indoor variety, and we have an excellent guest, perhaps one of the godfathers of the indoor version of lacrosse, this week on our here little show, and his name is Russ Cline, and together with his colleague at the time, Chris Fritz, were essentially the two progenitors, inventors, creators of what is now known as the National Lacrosse League. Actually, the second actual league to use that name, the original National Lacrosse League, for those aficionados out there, was something that ran in 1974 and 75, but was the name that was adopted in the late 1990s around something that Russ and Chris started back in the mid-1980s. It was then known as the Eagle Pro Box Lacrosse League. That quickly became the Major Indoor Lacrosse League. And then in 1997, through a bunch of events that we'll talk about later in our conversation, became what is now known as the National Lacrosse League. And it's a very, as many of our conversations are, interesting story, certainly not a straight path by any means. And it is a very insightful discussion that we have with Russ about, frankly, how one of these leagues gets started. The impetus behind it, the purity and sanctity and the professionalism of the sport versus the entertainment and excitement and the just the sheer spectacle of what people expect when they go to sporting events, and the tension between those two. Nurturing a sport that had not really had a professional league to it before, and the ability for players who are passionate about the sport of lacrosse having the opportunity to play for money and in front of thousands of fans, yet juxtaposed with the realities of the economics of such, whether it be television or the lack thereof, or the ability to translate the sport of lacrosse, arguably a long-standing and heritage-filled game that dates back to the Native Americans, its ability to translate to a national footprint beyond, say, some of its, northeastern roots and Canadian roots. All kinds of fun and interesting stuff. And I think you'll find some very eyebrow-raising stories from our guest, National Lacrosse League / Major Indoor Lacrosse League / Eagle Pro Box Lacrosse League founder, Russ Cline, who is our guest. And we'll be getting to that chat in just a couple of minutes. So stay tuned for that. I think you're going to find this very, very interesting, even if you're not a lacrosse fan, and hell, if you even don't even know what the sport of lacrosse is. You will find this enormously interesting, as I did. Before we get to our chat with Russ, of course, we want to tell you about our promotional friends and encourage you, of course, to please take advantage of said sponsors and what they have to offer, because by doing so, you give us a little bit of love and keep our little fledgling podcast alive and growing, and a few little shekels to help pay for the costs of getting this show up and running and out to you into your earbuds every week. Audible, the audiobook service, of course, is one of our longtime sponsors, and we encourage you to get your free audiobook download and free 1 month version or 1 month trial of the service by going to audibletrial.com/goodseats. Again, audibletrial.com/goodseats. It's your opportunity to choose from an extensive array of over 180 some odd thousand titles. That's an incredible amount of titles to choose from. And there's absolutely got to be something in some genre, some author, some publisher, some topic that's going to be of interest to you to burn off your free audiobook download credit and enjoy your use of the Audible service for a month. You can cancel at any time. I need to underline that. It's a no-risk proposition, and audiobooks are awesome, and they're fun, and they're a great way when you're not listening to your favorite podcast, wink, wink, nod, nod, to occupy your time. Again, audibletrial.com/goodseats. Get your free audiobook download now by doing so, and thank you for doing so. Our other sponsor, of course, are our friends at sportshistorycollectibles.com, where our friend Dean Mitchell and friends offer you a promotional code that allows you 15% off your purchases when you use the code GOODSEATS. And at sportshistorycollectibles.com, they have a nice little tagline that we're going to try to use. It's called the perfect gift for the sports fanatic in your life. And absolutely it is. Because if you're a fan of an historical team, whether it exists today in some form or fashion or doesn't, you're going to find an absolute amazing assortment of memorabilia and programs and media guides and buttons and bumper stickers and pennants and all kinds of interesting things, some of which you didn't even think still existed, but have been found and beautifully nurtured and photographed in a very compelling fashion by proprietor Dean Mitchell there at sportshistorycollectibles.com. I think you'll find it just interesting to go to and visit. I think you'll find you'll lose a few major minutes, perhaps a couple of hours of time by foraging through the site. But I would imagine, as I have and have done, that you will find something that will tickle your fancy and convince you to purchase and order something from the site. And when you do, sportshistorycollectibles.com, you better sure as hell use that promo code GOODSEATS for 15% off your purchases. Again, sportshistorycollectibles.com, a place to find that perfect gift for the sports fanatic in your life. Thanks, Dean, for your sponsorship. And thank you, of course, to our friends listening out there who give it a try and hopefully take advantage of that promo code, Good Seats. Please do. All right, so let's segue into our very compelling and interesting conversation with our friend Russ Cline, the founder, the godfather, the co-godfather, I guess, of what is now professional indoor lacrosse. And I think you're going to find this conversation very, very intriguing, as I did. So please, as always, enjoy. I'm honored and frankly excited to actually finally delve into the sport of lacrosse, the indoor variety. And aside from your partner in crime, who we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a couple of seconds, you're basically almost like the godfather of the modern day version of indoor arena box lacrosse. And I'm excited to sort of chat about it because I think it's a story that most, I guess you could say, casual sports fans don't sort of fully understand or grasp. And there's a whole bunch of a growing number, of course, of lacrosse fanatics, right? It's obviously become a much more, popular sport, even since your early days in the 80s of getting it up and running in the indoor variety. So I'm hoping you'll enjoy regaling us in some of the earliest days and maybe some of the maybe unknown sort of stories about what ultimately became what is now known as the National Lacrosse League, but a very interesting, somewhat a torturous history prior to that.
Yeah, everything grows out of some pain that's any good. We're born out of pain, and great ideas are easy, but putting them to work takes a lot of sacrifice, and I appreciate so much you're giving me the Godfather mentor, but I will tell you that so many people made this work and made it happen, and I certainly was honored and lucky to get to be a part of it, because when I went into the sport, leaving the Kansas City Chiefs, and I was doing a ton of different things. I'd worked for them for 10 years, and I was the first promotion director in the National Football League. I didn't know anything. I'd really never played football to any extent, and got to rise to a great prominence of working in the NFL, and what a great honor that was. And when Chris actually brought me the concept of lacrosse, and we looked at some film together, I fell in love with it, and I didn't really know how to spell it. I didn't know if it had two S's or two E's, because I'd grown up in Florida, and I never played it, and ended up in 2 Hall of Fames with it, and only in America. But what a great sport it is, and what a great country to be able to if you can rally an idea, and there is a basis and a base, and certainly lacrosse has its history in the Native Americans, and the more I was involved with it, the more I grew to love it.
All right. Well, let's start there. So you obviously doing marketing and promotional work with the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City, in the Kansas City metropolitan area. How does this cross your radar? How does Chris Fritz come into your life? How does all this sort of start from, I guess, the idea stage into some semblance of, hey, there's something here, and maybe the two of us should pursue it?
Well, I can't even, only once in your life, maybe twice if you're lucky, you run across somebody like Chris Fritz. And he is without question one of the most special individuals, and he and I remain very intimate friends, and have worked together for years and years and years, and totally different, totally opposite. I was certainly much more disciplined to the business side and trying to make things happen, and we shared the same creative promotional ideas, but this guy he had to sleep in the alleys, because he got ideas and got things I had no idea where they came from. And when I decided, we actually partnered together on Major concerts in arenas and stadiums, and I was developing a company called Arrowhead Productions for Lamar Hunt, and we were competitors at first. And in a typical unbelievable way, he comes to me and he says, we can make a lot more money together than bidding against each other and fighting. And we actually made a friendship that was worth more than all the money we made, and we certainly were successful. When I left the Chiefs, we left it for monster trucks in mud racing and tractor pulls. And that might sound crazy to you, but that was some 40 years ago, and it's still one of the biggest things that's going on in our country. And it's now owned by Feld of the Ringling, Barnum and Bailey Circuses. The monster trucks we saw in the fields, and we saw that it was just beginning to happen. It was at farm places and state fairs, and we took those together into arenas and to stadiums, but we continued to look for new things. We were promoting 300 event nights a year in the United States, and we were promoting in Canada and Australia and Puerto Rico, and we were doing really, really well. We were making a lot of money, which gave us some play money that we could develop and get into what was a more of a real sport. And Chris brought a film from in some of the notes you sent me, which are excellent, by the way. It took me down memory lane. It referenced the old league in the 70s, and it showed some of the action in box lacrosse. And we were just like, wow, this is crazy, because we were both looking for a new sport for the 21st century. We thought we could make it go quicker in growth, but we knew it was going to take time, because outside of really that northern coast area and in Canada, the sport of lacrosse was not being played much across the country at that time. And so that's why we packaged in and went into that part of the nation, because we knew we had a chance to survive. And so we just began to set out and say, what could we do? We started off, Chris had the idea of doing it on roller skates, and to have something totally different, because you got to remember, we were not purist to any sport. And we were revolutionary in the sense that we wanted to think outside the box. In fact, we would often say to each other, we're not thinking outside the box. There is no box. Let's just do something different. And we knew we had a lot of confidence in our ability to sell and to promote and to present a product that people would like at a right price. And luckily, because of both of our backgrounds and experience, me on the NFL side and him and being a top promoter of music in the country, we had connections, and that we could build partnerships with that people would trust us. So we started right away looking at doing that American Canadian series, and we put together $100,000. We had 10 partners. Everybody put in $10,000, and we lost 100 plus another 100. And we asked who wants to go with us, because we think we found some markets we can make this go in. And we ended up being the owners of the league because everybody else quit and dropped out. It wasn't any genius to it. There was nobody else that wanted to go forward. But we believed in it enough after that we decided we would go ahead and try to put together and form a league and to birth something. And truly, it was birthing something from rules to everything that we felt we needed to have to do this version where it would be marketable in the United States.
Well, given that background, right? So I got to stop you right there. So there are two questions that immediately pop into my mind. Number one would be, why not? And maybe you did consider this, or maybe it was already charted territory. Indoor soccer at that time, right? Clearly, even in Kansas City, right? The Comets were quite the thing and selling out the arenas and stuff. And the MISL, right? Talk about a non-standard sort of version of soccer. That seemed to be sort of a hot thing at the time. I'm wondering why maybe that didn't cross your mind as a potential idea. And then maybe secondly is also what then in the 90s became roller hockey, right? With, RHI, Roller Hockey International, which essentially, I guess, is maybe this idea with skates, so to speak, right?
Right. And those are great questions. We knew John Foster real well, who was the founder of the league, the Indoor League, and I talked to John all the time. He was out of Des Moines, Iowa, and very close to us.
You're talking about arena football. I'm sorry, that's another one I should have mentioned, right? And Jim Foster has been a guest on our show. We've had two episodes with him. That's another one I would imagine you would be interested in. Sorry, I forgot about that.
Yeah. And so he was wanting to get us into arena football, and then on the indoor soccer side, we knew the Lewicki guys really well, and they were here in Kansas City, and they've gone on to be unbelievably successful in NFL and running AEG and other companies. But in both cases, Tim, those were imitations of the real thing. They were knockoffs to what America had already fallen in love with, and they'd fallen in love with football, not necessarily in indoor, and the outdoor soccer was such that it had its own brand, and taking it indoor, again, you were kind of the stepchild. The great thing about lacrosse is that we brought the real thing, and we could promote it as that. It wasn't a imitation of anything else, and it was totally unlike the outdoor game. And so we were just packaging what was already had been put together in Canada, and with great players. But our biggest first challenge was, where are we going to get players? How are we going to field teams? The disadvantage you have when you're a small sport, and by the way, so that to have some legitimate credibility outside of that, I have to start the X Games with ESPN, and we've grown those over 27 years. I'm still involved with the X Games, and now the X Games was able to move and has made a big impression into the Olympics. The Winter Olympics is going on right now, so all the snowboarding and all things there came into the Olympics because of X Games.
Yeah, absolutely. And sure, absolutely.
And 2.5 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was in Aspen with guys and gals that are winning gold medals right now from America. What we wanted to do, we felt that there was an opportunity, if we could do something with lacrosse, to introduce the country to not an imitation of something else. And so arena football was kind of, by the way, I enjoyed watching arena football. It was kind of a dumbed down version of the real game. And so you had to find a whole new market of people in football. The real football purist was not going to roll over into indoor, and neither would the soccer teams. And certainly, in fairness, outdoor lacrosse purists were our biggest protagonists throughout our career of trying to do what we were doing. Initially, they didn't want their players to play, and we had to have their players to play. But the outdoor game, while it's a good spectator, it's a good participatory sport, and that's why it's growing so big across the country. In my humble opinion, and I think some others would share, it's not a spectator sport to the degree that the indoor version is, because the indoor version is fast, it's rough, it's tough. It packages that in an indoor way, and the outdoor game was not established enough across the country. And remember, we had dreams of taking us all across the country, which now there is a team in San Diego playing next year, and there are teams in San Jose that played on the West Coast and in Denver and across the country. Our idea was to get it off that and introduce it to the whole United States, and it has happened. The growth process happened, and to a degree now that more kids are playing it, they will go watch that version. And the neat thing is, if they're really into it, a lot of the college outdoor players who are all Americans come into the NLL. And so you have some name recognition coming into play. So we just felt like that we didn't want to just be a franchise in a city of those other sports, which were minor sports like this would be. We wanted to see if we could mold a product and put our signature on that product. And you couldn't do that by owning just one team or one franchise in a market.
Now, that's very interesting. So, but before you sort of went about some of the mechanics of how to sort of get this up and running from concept to actual implementation, you mentioned briefly the original National Lacrosse League, which existed in 1974 and 75.
Right.
What of that did you and Chris know or didn't know about perhaps what glimmers of success and or things that maybe they didn't do correctly or just were disadvantaged by to think that you could do it differently 10 plus years later?
Well, first of all, we had the great advantage of being ignorant. So we did not spend a lot of time trying to replicate what had been done. We looked at what had been done, and they drew the crowds, and they had the great players of that time were there and they're playing the game. But the players actually destroyed it because you had individual owners running those leagues, and there was there was no real structure. The players were bigger than the structure. And so the players actually, in our opinion, brought that down. They weren't patient. They saw some crowds. Everybody thinks you're making money because people came in and it's fair. I mean, it's the same as true today. It's always been with athletes. They are the product, and they should be treated as fairly as possible. But typically, if the cost to produce the product becomes higher than you can sell it for to the public, it's going to fail. And we looked at it. We did not spend a whole lot of time on it. We figured that, we're going to start from ground up, and we're not going to worry as much about stars. We were giving guys, here's $100 a game. You bring your tennis shoes, and we'll give you shorts and shirts and a helmet, and bring your sticks, and let's go play lacrosse. And we were getting guys that played lacrosse that was taxi cab drivers in Baltimore to be referees. We were building rules. No one really knew how to enforce them when we started off. And it was the Wild West. And we were having trouble coming up with carpets. A simple thing is a carpet to put down. We went one time, and because we were moving one carpet around, and a carpet at that time, an indoor carpet was $50,000. That was a lot of money at that time. Now they're $100,000, $150,000. And so the carpet didn't get from Baltimore to Philadelphia. So we went out and bought a bunch of carpet remnants from a carpet store and just started putting Coke down on the ice and stomping down the rug. And it was like crazy. And it's a good thing that we weren't really very wealthy at that time, because it was so easy for a player to get injured. The liability factor in the 80s was not as big as it is today. And so the guys just went and played, and they'd go out there, and then they would spend their $100 at the post-game party. And it really was fun. And guys just say, yeah, come out play, and sometimes they're introducing to each other in the locker room. They practice together. But they were good players, and they played with heart. And the crowds, we had low ticket prices, so when the crowds got there, they just had a heck of a time. They had something to cheer for, and there were not all of the proliferation of smaller sports, and there's not as much entertainment to compete with. And we would sell out the Spectrum, and we would sell out these buildings in Buffalo and sell out. And we did so well, the teams would would give anything to do as well today. But the ticket prices went so high, and the cost to produce became so high, and the cost of insurance and protection and equipment, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's called growth and success. But at that time, we just went in there and we called it the Amtrak League ourselves. We actually took trains to all the different markets, and we'd play three games in a weekend, and we'd come out of Kansas City every weekend. And colder and heck, because we're playing in January, February, March, and we would go from get over a game, catch an Amtrak train out of Baltimore to go to Philadelphia all night long, get there and have a few hours of sleep and get the building, start putting stuff together. And everybody wanted to help. It was like they knew that there were so many individuals, so many building managers, so many PR directors. I can't tell you, guys like an Ike Richmond there in Philadelphia. That guy worked tirelessly to sell our product, and the product wasn't refined at that time, but it was fun. It was fun, and certainly fights became a part of it. And we never wanted players to fight. We really didn't. The lacrosse, the Outdoor Lacrosse League, the association would say, you encourage guys to fight. We don't encourage them to fight. They just naturally fought because somebody came up behind them and hit them in the back of the head with a stick. But we need the players on the field more than we need them in the boxes. But the fans loved that, and people didn't get hurt. We did not have big liabilities of them getting hurt, and they were great athletes, and then they would go do their day jobs, whatever it was. Some were making huge money, and like in New York franchise, and there was guys making $750,000, $1 million a year as stockbrokers coming out of these great schools and up north and coming and playing for $100. And then we had guys that weren't making that much, but they just loved. They were paying to play in leagues and club teams and they figured, hey man, these are people here and it's fun. We're getting something. Let's go have fun. Well, success always breeds different issues, and which it should. And it's not a criticism of anybody. As we became more successful, we had to then begin to figure out how we're going to keep this together and attract the best players. And then as we were successful and as lacrosse continued to grow, the players, as great athletes as they were, would read about all these guys signing for so much money in other sports, and they wanted to be paid. And now you're beginning to have that's when we began to wrestle with the economic side, because sponsors did not flock to this in the numbers that they do or pay that kind of money. Now, for years we had Coors Light, and we lost Coors Light, and we got Bud Light, and we got and people would pay, but then their budgets got such that they were going to put their money, because of the cost of the bigger sports, they had to cut some of the smaller sports. So, but at that time, it was just so much fun. You went in there, and this is how the post-game party started. And no post-game parties were like the ones in Philadelphia. We stayed with that franchise in Philadelphia. We loved Philadelphia. And we go down there, and if we won, man, we were heroes, and got people wanting to buy us beers. And when we lost, they were wanting to throw the beer on our suits. And it's the same way today. And then I love to see the spirit when they win the Super Bowl. And darn, I knew they were going to tear the town down when they won a Super Bowl. That's the spirit of those people, not because they're mean or unruly. They just love their sports.
A lot of pent up energy in Philadelphia for sure. Well, actually, let me stop you there for a second. So take us back to sort of 85, 86, 87, right? Because I think one of the crucial elements of all of this, and I'm really curious as to sort of how you came to this conclusion, perhaps in this Super Series tour that you started with in 85, and then you incorporated in 86, and then the launch itself in 87 per se, was this idea of a single entity concept, right? So you mentioned before franchises and all that kind of stuff. Our previous conversations with Jim Foster around arena football, if he could do everything over again, and I think he would like to on a number of fronts. It would be the day that he agreed to segue from a single entity to a franchise model. But you guys were kind of resolute from the very beginning. I wonder why, and it sort of colored your thinking about why this needed to be single entity, at least in the beginning, and maybe perhaps in your mind at the time over the life of this fledgling new sport.
Well, I think that when you have a part-time sport, and it is still a part-time sport, there may be for 10 or 15 guys in the NLL that the owners have hired them to work in their franchise and go sell themselves tickets and things like this. But there's not enough money that you can pay. These guys are not only talented players, they're talented and they went to good colleges and they make good money. And they've got to play the sport as an avocation. They can't play it as a vocation. It's not like saying, I'm going to go into the NFL. I'm going into Major League Baseball, the NBA, National Hockey League. You're not doing that. So they practice once a week. And usually they'll practice a couple days before the game. They'll come in on Friday, play a Saturday game or Sunday. And they give extraordinary time from their families. So to keep it single entity would be a way that we could keep it equitable to the players, because there would be superstars evolve. And so therefore, as a superstars evolved, you had to be really careful that if you had some people, especially there's a very high level of professional owners in the National Lacrosse League right now. I mean, these guys are very successful businessmen. They've studied the game, and they're very good. Initially, we were getting an accountant sells his business, and he makes several $1 million, and he played lacrosse in college, and his son is playing lacrosse, and I would buy a lacrosse franchise from you, and then my son will get to play. And then the egos get involved and said, you know what? I'm going to go buy Gary Gate. I'm going to get Gary Gate to move, because people had to play where they lived. And we had to distribute that talent equally, so that without competitiveness of the teams, you couldn't. People weren't going to just keep going and supporting a team that just got slaughtered all the time. So in the single entity, we had a scale that you got paid on tenure rather than on your greatness. So a Gary Gate or a Paul Gate were not making a lot more than someone who had been in the league the same number of years they've been there. Now, that's socialistic. I understand that. But to keep the league going for the number of years that it has survived, it had to be that way, because if you're going to pay all the money to 3 or 4 athletes, how are you going to attract these other guys? Because they have pride. They're successful in their businesses, and when they come away from their families, there's a value they attach to it, and the amount of training they individually do. They didn't have trainers. They came and they traveled all over, and they drove their cars sometimes 100 miles to practice, 150 miles at night, and then drive back after practice was over, gets over 10:30, 11 o'clock, and goes to work the next day. He may not be Gary, and he may not be one of the better players in the league, but he's given that. And so what we were trying to do is play a very hard game of trying to make it equitable, not on how great you were, but that you've given X value to this team, and that we would recognize your greatness by giving you plaques and these things. Now, you can't eat plaques, and I understand that, but the sport did not demand the great money, and because you didn't have a sponsor, you didn't have television contracts. You didn't have those things. No sport today could survive off their attendance. None. NFL couldn't. Major League Baseball couldn't. Nobody can. You're surviving off TV, and you're surviving off of sponsorships and big sponsorships. In order to do that, you got to reach a lot of people and make it worth their while. So that's the reason the single entity we could at least put together, be sure that one owner could not come in because they had a lot of money and didn't care how much they lost. I mean, you can't believe some of the money that's been lost in lacrosse in the ownerships. If they could, and they would do this in the NFL too, if there wasn't a cap, there's some of those owners who would buy every good free agent that's out there right now because they want to win above everything else. They don't care about how much it would cost them to lose. We cared. We didn't have the money. But even in that, the leagues have to protect themselves against their own success.
Well, you also had to start small, right? I mean, look, this is, as you said before, this is essentially a new sport, right, for all intents and purposes. Yeah. And, with settling on 4 teams largely in the Northeast, right, you got to crawl, walk, and then run, right, if you hopefully get to the run stage, right? Well, let me ask you this. So you mentioned television. It's a good time to talk about it. So you're obviously hindsight is clear, right? And television obviously is the mother's milk, right, of professional sports and then some these days, right? But give me some sense of where you thought television was either in the earliest days as you're putting all this together and getting the Eagle Box Lacrosse League up and running, or did you kind of just not think that television was going to be anything anytime soon in the makeup of this thing as it was getting off the ground?
No, we understood right off the bat. And that's why we went to, at one point, Prime Sports, which is an individual network of sports. We had over 20 million homes in distribution, free. We gave to them free. We gave them the tapes to try to expose the sport. They wouldn't pay us anything for it. So we would the building would use their camera people. We paid for that to get it filmed. And we gave it away because we had to sample the product to people in order to have any opportunity, because people didn't know what we were talking about. That's why we changed the name you mentioned from Eagle League to Major Indoor Lacrosse League, because Eagle League transferred to nothing. We thought it did because we got all into this idea of the Native Americans. We met with him. We met with the chief of the Six Nations, and he gave me, I still have it today, this lacrosse stick that a warrior used, and it's battered and beat. I treasure it, and I'm going, wow, this is unbelievable. And so we go, let's keep it to the native thing. But outside of that, what Eagle Box League, what are you talking about, an Eagle Box? So, but we know that in all the other sports, there was either national or major or something. So we had to change the name to make it sound bigger than it was. But we gave the product. We had good distribution. Now, I'm going to tell you a story that your listeners have never heard. Just to give you real quick, besides track fields, all these things we were doing, we were not just doing lacrosse. We were promoting major shows. I promoted the Michael Jackson Victory Tour. We were doing air shows. I was promoting Davis and Fed Cup tennis for the International Tennis Federation, and ESPN was a fledgling network at that time, totally devoted to sports. Over the network was filming Davis Cup tennis, and that's the U.S. versus other countries. And I was the promoter, and there was a guy on there by the name of Ron Simeo. He and I started the X Games together, but ESPN, they decided to do ESPN2. And ESPN2 was going to be totally dedicated to alternative sports. Today, because of so much product they have of college basketball games and NBA games and everything else, ESPN1 and ESPN2 just mold together. They're two different networks, but you still can only show one show in an hour on one network. So it changed from that. That was the first league that ESPN2 ever had on their network, and they came to me, and we had this big thing going with Prism and a distribution group, and they said, look, we're going to film the games, we're going to pay everything, we're not pay you, but we're going to come there, we're going to do it first class, we're going to bring in everything from sound technicians to this, that, and the other, and we're going to put it on, we're going to do a championship game. And they did. Not many people watched, but not many people were watching the network anyway. But we were the first league today, every major league, every major bowl game, all that is equally on ESPN1 and ESPN2. But after 2 years, 3 years of doing that, they got so much programming, we were squeezed out. But we always knew we had to build the sport, not just in the markets we were getting people to attend, because we couldn't expand. We couldn't stay 4 teams, 6 teams. We needed to have a lot of teams, and they needed to be to even have a chance to sell franchises.
All right, just when it was getting interesting, let's bring this to a grinding halt, shall we? Just kidding. We got to pay the bills around here, and our friends at Audible have been very helpful in attempting to allow us to pay some of those bills, and we want to call them out now and remind you that a free audiobook download is yours for the taking, and also a free 1-month subscription to the service of Audible at audibletrial.com/goodseats. Again, audibletrial.com/goodseats for your free 1-month trial of the Audible service, and most interestingly, a free audiobook download for you to enjoy. 180,000 titles and growing every day to choose from, and there's absolutely no excuse to not find at least one title amongst that cavernous selection available to you that you won't find to be enjoyable and good for the soul, including a couple of books that might be interesting to our audience. And yes, some new ones, frankly, that I'm finally listening to. One that I'm listening to right now is by Carson Cunningham. It's narrated by Paul Bamer, and it's called Underbelly Hoops, Adventures in the CBA, a.k.a. the Crazy Basketball Association, which is really, of course, about the Continental Basketball Association, which for many years was sort of this ragtag minor league of the NBA. And it's a book I'm about 2 chapters into right now, and hopefully maybe a guest will get for a future episode. Also in my queue, next up, is another guest that I'd like to get, and her book that she wrote is also narrated by her. Her name is Jeannie Buss, and of course, Jeannie is the daughter of Jerry Buss, of course, the wildly successful founder of the Los Angeles Lakers and the LA Forum, and Jeannie is clearly today the brains behind the Los Angeles Lakers today. She and her brothers were active, of course, in things like, along with her father, World Team Tennis, the Major Indoor Soccer League with the LA Lasers, all kinds of stuff. So her book is next on my list. That's called Laker Girl, and that too is available on Audible. And again, it's one of the many thousands of titles that you can choose from when you go to audibletrial.com/goodseats. And again, you too can get your free audiobook download to give it a try, perhaps one of those 2, or perhaps one of the other 180,000 titles available to you as well. Give it a try, audibletrial.com/goodseats. Thanks for listening, and back to our conversation. But so I guess the cynic would say that by staying single entity for a number of years, that perhaps limited the speed by which you could grow and or get into franchising, right? It seems to me like a double-edged sword, right? You want to protect and grow and nurture, right? Again, it's a pretty fragile thing, obviously with your promotional chops, certainly very helpful, but still it's a sport, right? And it's still not a widespread sport, and it's only in a handful of markets, and your television exposure is relatively limited. But wouldn't, I guess, the more aggressive sports executives say, well, isn't the model then to get faster and to maybe get to that national scale, and then that beget possibly television and more national coverage to go the franchise route? You guys decided not to, I guess. And I'd be curious as to why. I mean, I could see the positives, but I could also see potential negatives.
Okay. The thing that I think we all have to watch out for in our cavern of our wonderful minds is that being born in a garage doesn't make you a car. Saying that because you call yourself national, or you think you adopt a model. There have been more models. We were the first single entity sports franchise in the United States. That's historically correct. Now, when Lamar Hunt and the group formed the soccer league as we know it today, the soccer league in the United States.
Yeah, Major League Soccer, yeah.
I was a consultant to Lamar in the group that they wanted a hybrid of the single entity ownership, that they would have owners that represented the run the franchises and locally there, but that the league itself would control the payrolls, and that way they could prop up leaky franchises. See, the thing we were doing when we would expand, a franchise wouldn't do good. We were taking from the money from the one that did good and giving it and to keep that one going, to grow and build a sport. So we could have, if you look at the historical past years since there's been individual ownerships and the number of franchises, there's been something like 20-something franchises go bankrupt of not a single entity, of owners in the National Lacrosse League and the markets they've been in. Because you just because you get someone to own a franchise doesn't mean it's going to be successful. The thing that the Major League Soccer does, they take care of their weak franchises the way we did. We propped it up. So Philly was selling out. We weren't walking out of the money with that money, have that sell out there. We were putting it in Baltimore, who was dying. But we had to have markets to play in, and we had to expand the markets for the future of the growth. We had the plan, and certainly we were not going to keep it single entity forever. We were trying to take care of the baby and manage the environment of the baby, because when we get egos of everybody in there, ended up fighting back and forth in what is a very fragile environment for it to survive. We made money in lacrosse. We're the only people walking today that made money in lacrosse. We made it. So now the sport is better off today in in moving to these and having, because it takes big money now, big money to do these things. And the amount of money that people lose is astronomical, and they stay with it. How they're ever going to get their money back, I don't know. But we were never in anything to lose. We were just two old boys out of Kansas City that had been pretty successful, and when we did a concert, we didn't want to lose. We wanted to make money. If we lost, we were lucky we had some others that made the money, but we didn't win every time. So the single entity, this would have never got it would have never got off the ground without single entity. It really couldn't have, because it didn't have enough legs to survive and have the infighting of owners, have the amount of time it would have taken to come to. We were trying to play 6 games in 6 markets and work all the scheduling out, and we were always the last in the building to get the Saturday nights or the Friday nights. We were pooling our advertising dollars to promote. We were sharing and propping up markets that was not doing well. And Baltimore, by all rights, should have been the best market. It was never a good market. It failed under us, and it failed under the owner, single entity owner that took it over. And I don't think it was our fault, and I don't think it was his. Man, he lost a lot of money. But we were supporting that market because we needed Baltimore, because Baltimore is a hotbed of the lacrosse name, outdoor, and we put the gates there. We did everything we could, the marquee names of the outdoor, and it didn't work. And so as a single entity, you have 6 chicken franchises. Only 6 chicken franchises. It's the only name. It's not Kentucky Fried Chicken. These are just 6 franchises owned by the same guy, and he calls it Pokey Chicken. And if he sold each one of those individually, and he couldn't standardize a product to get it started, standardize what he was bringing forward, I don't think that this would not have lasted as long as we were able to keep it going.
What was the logic? So maybe give us a sense of sort of those first couple of years, right? So you start with 4, you get to 6 teams. You move New Jersey to Long Island, which certainly makes sense as a lacrosse hotbed. Give our audience a bit of a sense of sort of how you were received, shall we say, by the fans, to what extent the local sports media. It seems to me that you've got sort of maybe a dual market, I guess. One being sort of the lacrosse enthusiast, right? A relatively small but rabid fan base that I guess the challenge was, how do you convert them from the purist to the, hey, it's professional lacrosse, come see it. And then the other group seems to be more, I guess, of the, and probably bigger, my guess is, the sort of casual sports / entertainment fan that could sort of get into this game maybe without necessarily understanding or caring about maybe the nuances of the sport of lacrosse. Is that a fair assessment?
Very fair. And I will tell you that I don't think of the indoor lacrosse fans, there probably is maybe 30%, and I'm pulling this out of my bottom, okay, but I think I'd be pretty close, that are outdoor purists that come to that game. The outdoor game, the indoor game has its own market and its own profile and the people that like it. And I will tell you, if you've been in the outdoor league, they don't draw as many people as the indoor does. So the indoor are not going to the outdoor games. You've got a whole different market. You've got a group of people who like the up tempo, the skill, the run, the throw, the hit, and be able to do it in tight quarters. And then you've got the others who love the outdoor and the great skills that are there. And it's kind of what you grew up with. You know, it's softball versus hardball. You know, you got softball people and you got baseball people. And rarely do you find baseball people really going to softball until they get 30, 40 years old and can't handle hardball anymore. And that's true. That's not just true in lacrosse. That's true in all sports. I think that, and that's our biggest challenge today. I am very involved still in the market of sports nationally and internationally. And I meet with networks and I'm involved in that. And I will tell you, it's a big challenge today. It's the marketplaces of the world are becoming more segmented, and Major League Baseball is losing. Their biggest threat right now to the future of their game is the outdoor game of lacrosse, because kids are not playing baseball in the numbers, and many of them in the high school stage are going to lacrosse. And so you end up, there may be a great future. Now, it hasn't translated for Major League Soccer. More little kids play soccer because they run and they kick and pick dandelions, and it's a great sport for put your little kids in. I mean, there's, the soccer moms, you got 4-year-olds, the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, but then they abandon it and leave it. They don't go, it doesn't translate in going and watching it. They liked it. It was sort of like tennis, which I was deeply involved in the professional side of tennis, not playing, but promoting worldwide. And more people play tennis than go watch tennis. So there are participatory sports, and then there are spectator sports. A lot less people play football than go watch it. And that's true at the high school level. When there's a big game, if the high school is playing a baseball game, even if they've got a really good team, they don't have near as many as they'll have at a Friday night football game. And there's understanding the social dynamics of people and the psychological dynamics of the marketplaces. There's been millions of dollars spent of all the leagues and all the people marketing to figure that out. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's really not easy. And they're seeing less loyalty to brands. less loyalty to sports than what it was. And because there's so much more entertainment. There's so many more entertainment opportunities. And so it's very difficult. It's a lot harder today to really get sports to be successful, unless it's got a good enough name and is happening enough that you get television and sponsors.
Well, you were certainly getting those some attention, especially in those markets, right? That you were, even in '89, right, your second year. I mean, you were averaging attendance, just south of 10,000 per game, which was, for 6 teams and maybe 6 or 7 or 8 games for a season plus playoffs. I mean, in 1990, right, you're getting a 17,000 plus attendance at the Spectrum, right, in Philadelphia, perhaps one of your strongest markets, as you hinted at before. I think in 91, after Detroit came into the league, you bring in, for those who are paying attention, the 2 legends of college or collegiate lacrosse in the Gate brothers, right, which is almost akin to sort of a small sort of version of, I guess, it's having like twin Pelés, right, come into the sport. So you could get that sort of general interest player like, whoa, here are these guys coming in with, 3 national championships under the belt, and they're going into this. What is this thing they're going into? What is this sport of lacrosse all about? I got to think that you were stoking the fire with sort of the lacrosse purists, right, because it was professional lacrosse, right? I mean, there's nowhere else to have it, right? Jake Steinfeld and outdoor didn't come until 2001, right? So it was the only literally and figuratively game in town for anybody even nominally interested in lacrosse. But it also seems to me like you were, throwing a few more logs on that fire to get sort of that sort of general interest fan who just wanted a good sports excitement, entertainment value, so to speak. They go out on a Saturday night and have some fun.
Oh, and it was fun. We had hot tubs. Do you remember that? We had girls in hot tubs, and we played music throughout the whole game, and nobody did that at that time. We were playing this. Heck, if you didn't like the game, listen to music, and we had great music. We programmed in there, and announcers announcing. He's announcing it live in the game, not just goal number 12. They're announcing, and they're excited, and the crowd's excited, and people are playing, and they're jumping and cheering, and it's a family atmosphere, and it's cheap. It's cheap to go there. It's cheap to own a season ticket. You're only selling 6 games, 8 games. Everybody else was selling so many more. And then there was the post-game party. You go down, and you actually get to meet players. The players would all come down there. We wanted every player down there, every coach, me and Chris, and we'd go down there, and we would hang with those, and we'd have a band playing. And it was a festival as such. Today, music's played in games, NHL does it, and NBA does it, and all these, and we were being criticized, and they do crazy things. And I promote the N1 Street Ball Tour in the United States and overseas. And the NBA hated the N1 guys because they would do ducks behind their backs and do these things. What do you see in the NFL today? That N1 tour changed the NBA. And what they said, if people will pay that kind of money to go see those guys do that, and we need people coming in the stands, you know what we're going to do? We won't tell them not to showboat. Let him showboat. If he can turn 2 times around and throw the ball in over his head, people go crazy for that. And so there's an evolution of entertainment. And when sports is no longer entertainment, NFL got in trouble this past year because of a lot of involvement of using the national anthem by some of the players as a protest. Their way of protesting. They weren't necessarily wrong to protest the issue. They just picked the wrong thing. And so therefore, there was a backlash suddenly against the whole NFL, a backlash against NFL players because it got mixed with idealism and patriotism. You got to be really careful People see it as fun, and they see, and these guys, they weren't overpaid. They loved these guys. These were lunch pail guys, man. They came to work and got $100, just like most of the people sitting in the stands were doing, and they worked their tail off for them. And then they go to see the Eagles play, and a quarterback getting paid millions of dollars can't complete a pass or throws an interception, and it hacked them off. Didn't hack them off as bad. This guy's only getting 100.
Well, that always became a deliberate part of your marketing strategy, right? Sort of the regular guy sort of angle, right?
It was the truth. It was an American dream. It was Jim Thorpe. It was, you get to, a guy who works as a FedEx driver gets to go on a Friday night and play for 15,000 people and play a game that he loves and use his skills, and certainly need to spend a lot of time with ice afterwards, because he didn't work out every day. He had kids. He worked. He did. These were great guys. And I'm going to tell you what, the quality of the lacrosse player is just, I love these guys. They love to party. They're great athletes. And they love their fans. They are involved. When I first started in the NFL in 1974, players would smoke in the locker room, dude. They would, in the halftime, they needed a cigarette. You do that today, it evolves. Everything evolves. And so sports has evolved. The fun of sports, a lot of it has gone. It's become very professional, and well, it should be. I mean, it's a big business, and the big business can take the entertainment out of it. At that time, that was Ringling, Barnum, Bailey, lacrosse fun. And your team may have lost, but you had fun. You listened to music. There was crazy things going on. You did crazy things in the halftime. They had fun. And what people want today still is, if you can find a way they can have fun, alleviate some of their pain, because there's so much pain in the world. Make me have fun. If I go to a movie and I'm bummed when I come out, I'm going to go back and see a movie like that. So life, these guys brought life. And I'm down there, out there, and announcing and slapping them on the back and running around the arena with them. And they go, man, there's an owner. Look, that guy's an owner. And he's up there running around. And he's going to come down in a minute. And I'm going to tell him what a horse manure owner he is when we get down there. And I'm going to tell him he should be paying them more. I said, yeah, I know. They should be paid more. I never said they shouldn't be paid more. We just weren't making enough money to pay them more. It wasn't like we weren't going to share it. We even gave the players, when we came to the toughest time of where they wanted to form, they formed an association. It wasn't a union association. We said, we will give you our books, and we will let you bring an accountant, any accounting firm, willing to pay for the accounting firm, will give you our books, and you look at every single thing. And they thought we were making millions of dollars off them. You couldn't even map the numbers. And these guys, as smart as they were in their work, it wasn't millions of dollars if you added up every single thing and multiplied it by 100. And gross, let alone expenses. And they said, we don't trust you, we're not going to do it, because you're hiding it somewhere. That's how the distrust became and a frustration. And so therefore, once I just shut it down. So we're done. I will not leave my family as much as I'm leaving my family and do this when I'm making really good money in other places. I'm not going to do this. As much as I love it, I won't do it. And they came back. And I never lost, though, admiration for those guys. And I understand, man, I grew up from nothing. And these guys were all doing well, and they were sacrificing. They were sacrificing more than me. Okay, I give it to you. I didn't get by a hockey stick or a lacrosse stick. You are sacrificing more, but I'm sacrificing too. And we're in it together. For the first 5, 6, 7 years, man, everybody was in it together, pulling. And then it's like the family. You know, somebody gets a little bit, hey, I'm not getting treated as well. Dad, you treat the others better than you treat me. And then pretty soon there's a divorce headed down the road. And then so we started selling franchises. We sold them, And by the way, up until then, nobody even wanted to buy them. It wasn't because we wanted to have them. If somebody gave us money, tell you a really funny story though. You want an anecdote, funny story. There's a guy, and I won't name him. He in Long Island. He was a billionaire. Had his assistant call us and said he would like for us to come and meet with him at his mansion in Long Island. That's when we had the team over in Long Island, and we thought, oh my God, we've hit it. This is so great. So he buys his first class tickets from Kansas City, has this limo pick us up, takes us out there. It's going to be a one-day deal. We fly in the morning, we're flying back that night. We go in, we sit down, he comes in, and he's wearing his robe. And he's got about 10 guys around this big, long table, consultants, attorneys, and what. And he says, I like what you boys have done. I want to give you $1 million for the Long Island lacrosse team. And I said, yeah, first I tried to keep from soiling my pants because I had to fly back. $1 million for the lacrosse team. What do you want to do with it? He said, it's my wife's birthday. I want to give it to her, the team.
The New York Saints would be a birthday gift.
Would be a birthday gift. And we said, we would love to have you involved with us in some way. We can't just sell one franchise. Oh, but that $1 million looks so sweet. And he says, okay, well, then we don't have a deal. He said, I might come over and win a game sometime. Got back in the limo, took it straight back to the airport. We got our plane back. That's the true story. And I won't tell you the name. That's the true story.
But, okay, so that is an amazing story. But did that give you an inkling that maybe it was time to start thinking about the franchise thing? Or was that just an amazing one-off memory that did not convince you that single entity was worth leaving anytime soon?
Yeah, we never held on to single entity because that it was ego or because we were doing so well from Amazon. It was worked like crazy. We had 2 or 3 franchises. When we actually started moving franchises well before we were forced to do it. We started moving them. And by the way, the infrastructure began to crumble. It is there's cracks and things as you go, and you've got to pay dues, and some wouldn't pay dues, and everybody's got to be willing to. You all got to agree on. We got to agree on a rule change, and we got to do that, and you remember we were in an avocation ourselves. We had other businesses that were really making us a lot of money. I was on the road so much. I don't know. I've been married 37 years. I don't know how my wife stood it. And we were very successful and remain successful. But one of our proudest and one of our when Chris and I get together and we're not young anymore, the proudest thing that we talk about and we laugh and it is the days, the camaraderie that you can't buy. Hey, I was at the college football playoff championship games. I helped with ESPN as a consultant. I've been to each one of them. It is standing in Atlanta on the sideline, and I didn't feel a tenth of the pride and the joy because that wasn't mine. That wasn't anything I helped really create. But what a great thing to get to be there and see Alabama and Georgia on the sideline and see these thousands of people. I know it's going to millions of people across. That some of those post-game parties stand down there, and I did not drink because I did not want to make a fool out of myself in front of those fans or those kids, and I signed autographs, and those autographs meant nothing except to them. Man, it was what a great experience. And I want to tell you before we conclude this that these guys that are in the NLL right now, the players and certainly the leadership and these owners, be thankful for them. They love the sport and they put so much more because it requires it now financially and on the line, and they all want to win, and they all want the good of the sport, and they all want to be successful. There's some really great men that have the reins of lacrosse right now in the National Lacrosse League, and we were proud to be a part of it for a long time because we kept the wings. We kept that, and they're our friends. They're good men. And lacrosse needs a break of some kind. I don't know what it is, but it's not because they don't put their money in. It's not because they don't work hard, and it's not because they don't care. They love that sport. And to the thousands of my Philadelphia people out there that many of them you're my Facebook friend. I see your kids growing up, and I want to tell you, thanks for the memories. Thanks for the memories, and thanks for the support. And it's because of you that we can laugh, and Chris and I can really shed kind of stupid tears sometimes from laughing and joy of the times that we spent with you. And it's our great restaurant over there at Donardo's that I hadn't been in so long. Every time we come in Philadelphia, we go there and crack crabs, and my fingers will be bleeding. Oh, man, I've eaten all over the world, Donardo's, all over the world, none better than crabs. And I thank you for letting me be a part of this, Tim. And I know we go on forever, but we've probably worn people out. Lacrosse is a great sport, and it is growing. The outdoor games are growing so big, and that's so exciting, and the fans are loving it. And just one day, who knows? There's never going to be, I don't think, the magnitude of these big sports like NFL and Major League Baseball. But you don't have to do that. You can have a niche that is firm and good, and I know Major League Soccer continues to be more successful, and this is going to be too. And thanks to the guys that are carrying on the mantle.
Well, first of all, thank you for taking all this time. In many respects, we've, I think, only even scratched some of the surface of this, and I hope this is not the last of our conversations around lacrosse, the pro variety, the lots of interesting stories that you've hinted at that would love to get a little even more deeper into, and I look forward to hopefully staying in touch, and maybe a few other folks from your days in the Eagle League, the MILL, the transition to National Lacrosse League, etc. Could regale us with some of those. But I can't thank you enough. This has been a great introduction and a great setting of scene about the sport of lacrosse in this country, and hopefully we'll have a few more in-depth conversations about it in the weeks and months to come. So thank you so much.
If I don't die, Tim, you get more shots at it.
All right. Well, I'll take you up on that, Russ. All right, there it is. You lacrosse fans out there cannot lambaste me much longer because there's an episode devoted just to you. And as we often find in our conversations, we, I think, just scratched the surface, didn't we, of some of the things. We didn't even get to a whole host of things about some of the teams and the players involved, and the migration or the translation or the transition from single entity into the franchised-owned now National Lacrosse League. And my hope is that we'll have a number of other conversations with some key participants in this history of a very exciting sport and entertainment offering known as indoor lacrosse. I'd love to get one or both of the Gate brothers. I think Chris Fritz would be a great guest to have, the co-founder and, like I said, co-conspirator, if you will, with Russ on the origins of the league and what became now known as the National Lacrosse League. But clearly some intriguing stories and just revelatory in, just even if you're not a lacrosse fan per se, but just an understanding of big-time, professional sports, the entertainment components of it, the role of television, how you nurture a sport, the debate, right? We heard this with our friend Jim Foster around the Arena League, the debate, Arena Football League, about, to single entity approach the league, to franchise it? How do you possibly bridge the two in between? And arguably a time and an era 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago even, when things might have been a little bit more straightforward to be able to sort of birth some of these things versus perhaps today where it's a little bit more difficult. Or hell, some people would even say it's actually a bit easier given the proliferation, he says, of television and certainly video and social media. Maybe some of those things are a little bit more straightforward and easy. You can go more directly to fans. You can generate some other revenue streams much more quickly versus just selling tickets and having to prove it and then get television coverage. I don't know, the debate rages on, but I sure as hell know that we have many more conversations about indoor lacrosse, certainly outdoor lacrosse, the original National Lacrosse League back in the 70s, and just a whole host of other topics, both detailed around lacrosse and tangential to it in the weeks and months to come. So hopefully you'll stick around for those kinds of conversations. And obviously, if you've got some suggestions on how we do that and some of the people that might be helpful for that, we certainly encourage you to let us know. And of course, the best place to let us know is to find our email address at our website, which is goodseatsstillavailable.com. Of course, you'll find this episode among the 50 plus other episodes thus far there. You'll also find links to all kinds of books and media and all the things that we reference during the course of our conversations. And again, that's goodseatsstillavailable.com. Visit early and visit often. And of course, you'll also find our social links there. On Twitter, you'll find us at goodseatsstill. On Instagram, we're at goodseatsstillavailable. You will find a Facebook page devoted to the site. You can message us in any of those places as well. However you choose to interact with us, please do so. And we encourage you to do so. And of course, please rate and review us. Please, please, please. Apple iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever moniker that you Appleize your podcast listening, or anywhere else for that matter. If it's Google Play or Auto Radio or Stitcher or iHeartRadio, you hear us on Stitcher. We said Stitcher or you name it. We're just about everywhere. Google Play Music, Spotify, wherever you find us. Tune in. By all means, leave us a rating, a review. We certainly love that too. That helps us and helps others, frankly, find this show and discover hopefully what you enjoy on a weekly basis. One last thing, of course, our friends at Podfly Productions who help us put this showgram together every week without fail. And in particular, our friend Jerry Payne, the good doctor who helps us every week by putting all our components and pieces and various audio files together to make it sound smooth and nice. So thank you so much to our friends at Podfly. And again, you can find out more about them and their podcast services at podfly.net. And we encourage you to check them out. And of course, tell them that we sent you. All right, so we're going to send you on your way. And we thank you again for giving us some listens this week and every week, of course. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.